if you're trying to find out about environmental things, the League of Conservation Voters has a free document every year on the voting record of politicians. Also, the Sierra Club does the same thing. If you don't like how they vote, maybe you should think about voting them out of office.
In terms of listening to our speakers tonight, I feel like there's a need to actually share a sense of a clean energy future that addresses the inequities, that basically solves the problems and shows us where to go. And I feel like some of the conversation has been a little too vague in that regard in terms of envisioning a bright future. The second piece of this is I feel concerned that there hasn't been as much urgency placed here. The IPC just came out with another report, and the IPC scientists said, this is your final warning, okay? You've got to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030, and they said that 3 years ago, and we're still going in the wrong direction. So there's a sense of urgency that seems to me to not have been conveyed. And then as a practical matter, there were a few things thought out here. We can't solve this problem by us buying electric cars. The government has to act. The government has to act. We cannot solve it individually. And in that regard, I want to just point one thing out here. I have a map here. This is from the city of Richmond's data that we put together as a map. And it is all of the 900 gas leaks across the city and Henrico County. In fact, more of them in Henrico County, over 500 gas leaks there. Okay, the leak rate in the city in the gas works is over 5%. That means that the gas we're leaking right now is worse than burning coal. Okay.
Are we talking about natural gas?
I'm talking about natural gas. That's correct. Methane is natural gas, and so we put this together because we really want to push the city's Richmond Gas Works to address this issue. It's a specific, tangible thing that we can do that really addresses a lot of the greenhouse gases. So I'll stop right there. The map is here. You can see where you are on it, but we need specific things that need to be done to address this critical issue, which is one is just methane. I mean, in fact, most of the scientists say if we can get a hold on methane quickly, it will buy us some time. Thank you. Sorry it took so long.
Continuously.
Sierra Club data. This is the data from the city of
It's
Richmond.
just considered the cost of doing business for them. And yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Sorry.
Respond to either one of those? Thanks.
Glenn is right.
Well said, well said.
I didn't hear a question asking about solutions.
I would just say, I'm not here to be an optimist. It's solvable if we do something. The technology is there, we just need to do something.
Yeah, in terms of envisioning a future, I'll say the same thing. The technology is here. We know, as I mentioned earlier, we know what we need to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's not investing $50 million in a hydrogen plan for 30 years from now. It's energy efficiency. It's rooftop solar. Maybe it's utility scale solar too. That's a different conversation. So yeah, the technology is there, the opportunity is there, the vision is there. We need the political will and the grassroots mobilization to make it happen.
Yeah, part of that IPCC report says that we have until 2030 to make all of the decisions that will determine the ultimate outcome, right? Of which kind of, they call them the pathways, either the worst, the medium, or lowest impact. And that's not to do all the things, but it's to make the decisions that will determine which path we're on. So that's 7 years. But then when you add in local government, we operate on a 5-year, that CIP cycle I was talking about, where all of these big ticket items are, and where there's all this carbon and methane and all these embodied choices built in. So it might be 7 years, but then when you look at a local government, it's 2 years to decide essentially what path we're going to be on. That's our time frame.
Right, because it's, you say 7 years to make the decisions, but it's to make the decisions and embody them in a set of regulatory law that gives us the accountability that we need, not just say, yes, we're going to do it and make a plan.
Right, to
Right.
implement that more. Not implement all of the things, but
45% reduction by 2030, a 45% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030.
That's what we need to do. And that means we have no new fossil fuel infrastructure. That's actually what they said. No new fossil fuel infrastructure. No new gas pipelines. No new gas connections. That's really where we need to be headed. And we're heading in the wrong direction.
Had one of those gas leaks. I reported it about 15 years ago. The city came out within 5 minutes. They looked around, they dug way down, they couldn't find the gas leak. I reported it again a few years later. I saw the same bubbles coming up from a water puddle. They came out, looked up and down in front of my house next to the street, couldn't find anything. They don't have the equipment. They probably need about $100 million worth of equipment and training to be able to deal with all those leaks. They would love to deal with those leaks. They just don't have the gear.
I mentioned was the social determinants of health. It's a public health model for understanding how we can improve the lives of our neighbors, our citizens, community members. And so when we kind of zoom out and we think about what is causing climate change, it's the same systems that are harming minorities, individuals of color, individuals that are experiencing issues of domestic violence. These are the systems that come in and redevelop an area and lead to gentrification that doesn't account for the impacts for those around it. The same systems that will put, industry and pollution-causing, plants and industry in these lower income Black and brown communities. So while it's not every individual, the statistics show and the maps and the data show us that these systems cause both. So if we don't address them at the same time, we will in fact only create a more sustainable and resilient future for the people that already have the tools, the resources, the living conditions, and so we'll just further exacerbate those inequities.
It's an initial investment for a lot of communities, like to see trees and community gardens, and you're doing it the right way. Like that's not your only touch point, right? So you're out there, you get community buy-in. But then you're like, we want sidewalks, we want better lighting, we want safer playgrounds. Oh, let's see what the school looks like down the street. We notice that there's not access to fresh and healthy foods. We're seeing that there's, not a lot of employment opportunities. I think to Laura's point, what she's also saying is just like, we have to invest in people. And investing in our environment and where we live and green spaces is one of those solutions in how we invest in people.
Space to understanding this is sometimes inconvenient. Like EVs are not always convenient. Biking somewhere, that's gonna take you longer than taking a car, but it's better to be biking. The throwaway culture of just disposable things, switching people's minds to thinking more this way, in like our capitalistic society, understanding that profit and things being made cheaper isn't necessarily the way to go. How do we start changing very entrenched minds to that mindset to a new way?
See, some of the strongest motivators are money and health and safety. There are a lot of ways to save money by doing greener things, by adding insulation, changing light bulbs, turning down the lights. So if you can connect economic savings to green and sustainable solutions, you have a much better chance. Unfortunately, we have culture wars going on, which makes it a whole lot harder. But in my experience lobbying in Congress, if I go in there and say, talk about green vehicles, green fuels, they don't care. We talk about saving money, investing in America, jobs, clean energy like electricity, biodiesel, that's made here in America, they listen. So for the folks that don't care about the environment, it's not the right cultural touchstones for them. They care more about saving money and convenience. Healthy food is another thing. I talked to a guy recently. He's into farming, natural carbon sequestration through his farm, and his dad was like, "What are you doing? What's all this about? What's this organic stuff?" And he said, "Dad, remember when you were a kid and food tasted really good? That's organic." And his dad got it. So he found a way to connect that there's one of the benefits of sustainable life and sustainable solutions to something that made sense to that subset of a culture.
And I think Cherie said it. Change is an individual. And so how do you relate and share values with those individuals to help make they help create and foster that desire to be part of this human-centered, people-centered work.
And I would also want to push back to say we need to kind of push back on the notion that transitioning clean energy and sustainability requires sacrifice and inconvenience. It's inconvenient now to ride a bicycle a lot of times, but if there are more bike lanes and fewer parking lots, it would be more convenient to bike in many instances. And I think that you can take that same analogy and what we need to do is envision a future in which we've done all these things, we have them all working together and demonstrate how the quality of life and the convenience and the economic benefits and equity can all be greater. And to a lot of opposition to these changes is rooted in is rooted in the fact that as we sit now, each incremental step may be difficult, but if we do it all together and work on investing in it, then we can achieve a better future. But also, the original question was about how we change minds. I think it was kind of the original, and I think that Maya is best equipped to answer that question. I'd like to go here.
Yeah, I'd actually like to combine two things that were just mentioned with food and then inconvenience. So I'm currently taking a capstone class at my school. It's called Future of Food. We're learning about farming practices and conventional farming practices and its detrimental effects on the environment and also on health and animal welfare, all of those things. And it's inspired our class to approach our school administration and to ask for different food sourcing practices and also for labeling in our cafeteria. And it's going to happen, so very exciting. But we're hoping to see a transition in behavior in the cafeteria, so people choosing organic foods that have labels over things like pizza or the meat that's served. That's the goal, and by equipping people with knowledge, it not only will change their minds, for lack of a better term, but also their behavior, which I think is really important in this case. And when it comes to making sacrifices, which it's important to acknowledge that not everybody has the same financial means or ability to as a result of decades-long discriminatory policy and various reasons. But for those that can, hopefully they will.
Great comments. That is work way over. Another interesting.
Very large and overwhelming, and I imagine that the conversation looks different depending on where you are and who your audience is or what your locality or jurisdiction is. Specific to Henrico, and I got here a little late, so I didn't see where all of you guys are from, but what you know about Henrico and our demographics and our what we're working with, are there examples of localities or other places that you think would be great models for our leadership to use as a template?
In urban planning, to say you should look at Portland, but I'll say that anyway. It's specific to this question about the role of counties, because seeing counties as part of an interconnected metro region and what they've been able to accomplish in the Portland metro region is having suburban centers in places like Beaverton, Hillsborough, Gresham, like the equivalent of an Henrico County or Chesterfield County, right? And where they have dense mixed-use land use patterns, and they have transit connectivity, and that connects throughout. You can get from one dense mixed-use suburban center to another via mass transit, or via a nice protected bike lane. So I would say. Yeah. Again, it's trite to say Portland is what we should look at for sustainable planning, but it's true. That's why we always say it, and it's also true with respect to the kind of suburban dimension of sustainability.
Positive, to try to think about. I really like the many words, but one word that Laura Thomas uses, leapfrog, and instead of spending a lot of time drawing up a plan and going through a long process like some localities have done, which includes Richmond, use their ideas and leapfrog it. Also, one quick point to make is that you need to get grant writers all over the county. You just, if you don't have one, hire one, or several, and get that money now because it's here. It's coming in increments, and it will be coming for a little while, but you never know how long it will last. And there's a lot of money. There's a lot of grants. There's always some place in the county that needs the money more. There's got to be some more disadvantaged area that could use the grants that are going to be the big grants, and go for some more charging stations, go for some more solar on your buildings, and go for more energy efficient buildings. And those are your big three. Thank you.
Could you tell us more about public schools with the climate action plan, how they would be involved?
Data, but common sense. The public schools, at least in Albemarle County and Charlottesville City, have created schoolyard gardens to help familiarize students with being outside. They've shared, the county school system has purposely put schools near each other and sort of designated those as impromptu park lands, so they'll actually connect the parks together, and then they allow that space to be used as green space for the community. And as Maya said, there's school program related to the food. They could just turn off the lights at night. My schools don't do that yet, but that would be quite helpful. So there are building control systems where they could just save a little or a lot of energy when that's not being used.
Actually, it's made me think of one thing. So I've lobbied the Virginia General Assembly, it was back in January, and I came across a bill that was to establish an environmental literacy fund in public schools, but it's been introduced in the past, but it's been laid on the table, and that is something we've talked about, knowledge, inspiring action, and although I recognize there's a lot of clever marketing that's trying to shift responsibility on the consumer, there's merit in knowing that we do have power and that knowledge can shift behaviors. So I think that would be something really amazing. That's not related to climate planning, but I would love if that came to be one day.
Can I ask something really quick?